Hey Star Wars fans, welcome to another episode of Star Wars Doctrine. I'm excited to discuss more of our favorite galaxy with you guys. It's been a lot of fun stuff with the Rise of Skywalker coming out, and one of the big things that's recently come out is Empire Magazine did a big piece on episode 9 and interviews with, Chris Terrio, J.J. Abrams. I've already talked a little bit about some of those, but this one I really just wanted to dive into this article, because if you guys haven't had a chance to read it, there's some just awesome stuff that are really getting me hyped for the movie, and they're just fun to talk about as fans of this universe in general. So I wanted to discuss them with you guys, get some of your takes and stuff like that, let you guys know some of the things that I'm thinking and hoping and wishing for. So yeah, I just figured I would kind of pick out some of the highlights that I liked from the article and read and discuss with you guys. So here we go. One of the first things that I found, let's see, where did that little quote go? Okay, here we go. This was when asked about, episode 8, how JJ felt about it, and kind of, I think he's been getting a lot of questions of people asking him, are you trying to retcon anything? And beating around the bush, like, are you going to change what Ryan did? And which I think is kind of an unfair question to JJ, just because obviously he has things that he can't say. Like, it's, even if he hated Last Jedi, he's never going to come out and just be like, oh yeah, it was the worst movie ever, and I'm changing everything, and Ryan messed up my whole plan. And anyways, like I said, it's kind of a hard question, but he always seems to find an elegant answer. And I do think you can read into some of it a little bit. But he answered it really well. This is what he said. He said, I never found myself trying to repair anything. If I had done 8, I would have done things differently, just as Ryan would have done things differently if he had done 7. But having worked on television series, I was accustomed to creating stories, characters that then were run by other people. If you're willing to walk away from the thing that you created and you believe it's in trustworthy hands, you have to accept that some of the decisions being made are not going to be the same that you would make. And if you come back into it, you have to honor what's been done. So that was really cool because, okay, first off, he doesn't hide that, yes, there's definitely things he would have done differently, which got my mind very curious about what direction JJ would wanted to have gone with 8. I would have been really curious to see what his script would have been. There is, regardless of how you feel about episode 8, in my opinion, I do think, and don't get me wrong, if you've followed the channel for a while, you know that I am not anti-8, The Last Jedi. I'm not anti The Last Jedi, and I'm not like 100% for it either. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. There's some things that I absolutely just love, like think was some of the best stuff we've seen. And then there's some stuff that I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I'm right in the middle. I do feel like I can be objective and kind of, have a civil conversation about 8, because I still watch it all the time. I'm totally fine with it. So that being said, I am curious what JJ would have done. And I do believe that you can't really deny that there's definitely a change of pace. If you were just watching 7 and then 8, it would feel like things are going one direction. They kind of went a different direction. Not necessarily always a bad thing, because I think that if you looked at episode 4 and episode 5, things kind of went in a different direction as well. But I do think that because they had different directors doing 7 and 8, you can kind of recognize the disconnect there. Once again, not hating on it, just saying that there definitely is a change of pace, something very different. And you could tell that the way JJ was going with some things, Ryan changed. Which, regardless of how you feel about it, it's just a thing. So that being said, JJ has a really good attitude about it. He says, look, I'm not trying to fix anything or repair anything. I accepted that, hey, this is the direction it's going, and now I just have to find a way to do what I want to do with the characters and incorporate the things that have been done. Sometimes a fresh perspective like that is really good, because you never know. JJ could have done 7, 8, and 9, and we might have really hated the character arc. Maybe this is for the better. We just won't know until we see how JJ wraps it up. But I think it's important, because a lot of people who say, hey, we should retcon episode 8, it just wouldn't flow as well if we just pretended that the things didn't happen in 8 that happened. So I'm happy that JJ is going to try and do what he wants to do while accepting that, hey, you got to honor what's been done in episode 8. So we'll see which direction he goes on that, but it definitely seems like he's not having a hard time making it work into his timeline, making it work into the story he wants to tell. I have no doubt that he'll be able to do that. But I did think it was really cool that he addressed that in such a cool way. Chris Terrio, I think it's Chris Terrio on this one. This next quote here, he says, "Some of the most interesting scenes in The Last Jedi are the conversations between Rey and Ren. We've tried to pick up that complicated relationship that really has been present ever since the interrogation in Episode 7. When Ren takes his mask off, there's a nakedness about him with Rey that he doesn't express to anyone else. Ryan developed that in fascinating ways, and we've been able to develop it even further." So that's one thing I actually really liked about Episode 8. I liked the cool bond that Rey and Kylo had. At first, it led me to believe that maybe they're siblings because Luke and Leia had a similar bond in the originals, but I don't really feel that way anymore. But I do think that it was a really cool way in the scenes and them opening up to each other, because now going in Episode 9, I'm like, is Reylo a thing, or are they just friends, or are they still just enemies? Just maybe Rey still hates him. She closed the door on the Falcon on him at the end. Maybe she doesn't think he's redeemable anymore. I don't know. It just leaves a lot of complications because there was a connect between our hero and our villain, and that's something you don't always get with a hero and a villain. It was really cool, a way to do that. And I do agree that ever since the interrogation Episode 7, because Rey was able to see inside of Kylo's mind as well, that they've had this connection. Kylo hasn't really been able to be completely honest with anyone. He couldn't be honest with Snoke, I don't think, because Snoke was abusive and rude and would have thrown it back in his face, didn't even want him to have the mask, and was just, wouldn't take time to understand him. And I think that's one thing that Kylo doesn't realize the dark side doesn't give him. Doesn't give him the support that Rey does. And maybe that's one way that they'll try and bring him back, if they're going to redeem him, that is. But yeah, the fact that they're going to expound on that, I don't know if that necessarily means, I personally don't think, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know what I think. Whether they'll actually have open communications again, where they can connect across the galaxy like that again, I don't know. But at first I would have thought that that probably won't be the way, but it very well might. It would be interesting to see how they're going to expound on that relationship. But doesn't sound like we've already reached an end of them getting closer and getting to know each other a little better, which is cool. JJ goes on to talk about how Kylo's mask's coming back. I've seen a lot of people talk about how that's a retcon, that, we're bringing Kylo's mask back when he destroyed it in Episode 8. And just to be clear, I don't think that's a retcon at all. I mean, it could be, but I don't feel like it is. And this is why. I think that the way JJ's tying that in is really cool. Okay, maybe Ryan did destroy the mask, but JJ didn't want him to, so JJ found a way to make it cool and tie it back in. But listen to this answer, because I think it all flows really well, actually. It says, having him be masked, but also fractured, is a very intentional thing, like that classic Japanese process of taking ceramics and repairing them, and how the breaks, in a way, define the beauty of the piece as much as the original itself. As fractured as Ren is, the mask becomes a visual representation of that. There's something about this that tells his story. His mask doesn't ultimately hide him, and his behavior is revealed. That's super cool. I loved that answer, and maybe he didn't originally plan on that until Ryan had the mask destroyed, or maybe he did the whole time, but the fact is that Snoke's the reason he destroyed the mask. He was told to take it off by Snoke. Okay, well, now he killed Snoke. So if you're Kylo and you were mad that Snoke was treating you that way and didn't want you to wear your helmet, now that you've killed him, your problem's out of the way, why not rebuild your mask? Why not go back to being the way you wanted to be? That's why he killed Snoke in the first place, right? That way he could rule and he could make his own rules. He didn't have to answer to Snoke anymore. So if I were him and I liked that mask and I destroyed it because of Snoke, now that I killed him, yeah, heck yeah, I'm going to repair it. I think it flows incredibly well. I love that. I don't feel like that's a retcon. I could be totally wrong, but I like the way that it flows. And the fact that, JJ says it's showing how fractured Kylo is. He's like, a mess. It makes sense. Plus, have you seen how cool that helmet looks? Like, I can't wait until they do a skin for that on Battlefront 2. Like, that is going to be one of the coolest skins. So I think it's really cool. That's just me. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. I'm sure there's a lot of mixed opinions on that, and it'd be interesting to hear what you guys think on that. Going on through the article, next quote I pulled out is this one. It says, "The heart of Star Wars for me is in the group of unlikely bedfellows on a breakneck adventure. And in the Rise of Skywalker, it's the biggest and most dastardly threat the galaxy has seen. The opportunity here was to have this group that has now become a surrogate family have to deal with this massive horror. The war to end all wars, not just on the outside, but on the inside, which is to say that it's meant to be as much of a challenge personally as it is physically." The surrogate family part stood out to me a lot because I think that one thing that is interesting about our main characters is that they, none of them really have parents. Like, Poe doesn't know who his parents are. He doesn't have family. Rey obviously doesn't know who her parents are. Poe obviously knows who his parents are, but, that's a whole nother story. So we're getting these three main characters who really can lean on each other and grow close together, which I'm bummed that it's taken 2 movies for this to really happen. But I think that those 3 are going to really come together, kind of like Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie did. And I think that that's going to be special, finding a place together. I like that they're going to be in a lot of scenes together in this movie because I think that's what Star Wars needs. Star Wars has always been like a trio, a little family of rebels, a little band together who's up against the odds, just like, said here. It's a crazy adventure that they're probably not supposed to win, but they have each other and they're going to find a way, and that's what Star Wars is all about. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. Finn's character development has been really good. I like that he went from deserter to finding a place, willing to sacrifice himself if he needed to save this cause that he's actually learned to believe in. And we got to see him slowly change his ways to be able to find that. So it'd be interesting to see where his character picks up. But now that he's really felt like he found a family, he's found a home, he's going to be there to support Poe and Rey and Rose and whoever, is part of this group. But yeah, I think that's going to be one of the most exciting parts of this movie. And then obviously it's meant to be as much of a challenge personally as it is physically. Shows me that the characters are going to have struggles within themselves. I think specifically Rey, but it'll be interesting. I think that there's going to be a lot of conflict within Rey, and obviously we've already seen the possibility that there's like the dark side Rey in that trailer and in the footage. So I think there'll be a lot of conflict within her, and maybe relying on some of her friends is going to help her get through that. But now the idea of Palpatine, which was obviously going to be asked in this interview, said, "Some people feel like we shouldn't revisit the idea of Palpatine. And I completely understand that. But if you're looking at these 9 films as one story, I don't know many books where the last few chapters have nothing to do with those that came before. If you look at the first 8 films, all of the setups of what we're doing in 9 are all there in plain view." That's crazy. That quote had my head spinning. Like, what do you mean it's in plain view? Like, if I go rewatch these, I'm going to figure out what you're doing with 9? Is that what you're telling me, JJ? It sounds like he really feels like everything's going to flow, which is what I want so badly for this film. It's like one of the only things I want for this film is for it to just flow. Bring all the prequels, originals together and the sequels and make them feel like just one big long movie, right? Like, I want to be able to feel like as I'm watching 9 that it's referencing the prequels and the originals as much as it's just talking about the sequel story. And JJ said that that's his goal. And that's a huge task. I think we've talked about it numerous times because that is what we need for this saga, and it's a big thing to have to do for JJ. So I admire him for being willing to take on that task. But revisiting Palpatine because he's been in most of the other films, he's been a constant, is a really interesting thought to me, because I agree with it 100%, but I also think it means a couple other things. And I could be just reading into this too much, but if JJ is going to tell us that Palpatine's there because he's been one of the constants, he's in everything, it just, all of the chapters have to come together, then that tells me there's other characters that really need to be in this movie as well, not just Palpatine. And I think Anakin is the number one choice. Of course, Palpatine's been one of the constants, but if you ask George Lucas, Anakin is the main character of all of Star Wars. Like, yes, Luke was originally the main character of 4, 5, and 6, but the story's really Anakin's, because Anakin's the chosen one who's brought back by his son to kill the Emperor and bring balance to the Force. And George has said that in interviews, that this is Anakin's story. So to me, you need Episode 9 to have Hayden Christensen as Anakin, please, because if it's his story, and perhaps that's what the Rise of Skywalker was all about, but you have to bring Anakin into it somehow, and I am just crossing my fingers for Force Ghost Anakin and Hayden Christensen to reprise his role, because that would just make my day. And it's no secret that Vader, Anakin, is my favorite character in all of Star Wars. So obviously I'm hoping for that, but that would really tie in all of the films. To have him present in some way, in a big way, would be awesome, but at least have him in there. I would love just a giant Force Ghost reunion where they're all taking turns teaching Rey different things and Anakin's there. But how cool would it be to see a Force Ghost conversation between Luke and Anakin, father and son, or Anakin and Obi-Wan, and just so much that could come out of that. I think that Palpatine can't be the only character who's been a constant, if we're talking about that. And I think that JJ may have given something away with that quote. Like I said, I'm probably reading into it too much and speculating a little too irresponsibly, sorry. But I'm hopeful, and I think that that's something that we could definitely see. The last little highlight here I got from this Empire magazine was something that's really special. He says, when you land on something that gives you the chills, that's the only way you know if it feels right. You can deconstruct it all you want and try and make sense of how you found it, but somehow it finds you. I don't know how to explain it. Just the way I can't quite explain how we had this footage of Carrie that we're using. You can say, oh well, it's just luck, it just happened to be, but it feels like something else. And I neither can nor want to explain any of it. Obviously talking a little bit about, I think at first, the movie as a whole, he feels like it's all falling into place, which is really cool. But then to talk about how the scenes with Carrie, he's basically saying he feels like there's more to it than just dumb luck, like I look at it as it was the Force's will that Carrie was going to have a big role in this movie, and they were able to do it because they had this leftover footage. Like, what are the chances of that? And first off, obviously we haven't seen how they're going to do that yet, but props to JJ for figuring out a way to bring Carrie into this with old footage. That is such a cool idea, and I don't think I would have ever thought of anything like that. I just think it's really special, and the way he talks emotionally about it tells me how special Star Wars is to him, and that's what we want as fans. You want the people who are making these movies to feel like Star Wars is special as well, because Star Wars is special to me. It's been something that's constant in my life, where I always had Star Wars, right? No matter what you're going through, you can read a Star Wars book, watch a Star Wars movie. I think I've told the story on this channel before about how almost every time I was home from school sick, I was watching Star Wars, just because there's nothing better to rely on when you're not feeling good or anything. Star Wars is awesome. There's never a bad time for Star Wars. That's obviously why I enjoy making these videos for you guys and having these discussions, because Star Wars is special to us. So JJ feels that way too, and that nothing can make me happier and make me want to trust him with this big Episode 9 project that he has, and I believe that he'll do well with it, and I'm just thankful he's approaching it in such a special way, and that Carrie means as much to him as she does to all of us. So lots that we went over, and lots of good stuff that came out of those articles. Obviously there's even more fun bits in there, but those are just some of the highlights that I wanted to talk about. I would love to hear your guys' feedback on any of the points that we talked about, and as always, may the Force be with you. If you haven't had a chance, please like this video, and if you're willing, please subscribe to the channel, because
it is your destiny.